Welcome to Dig Deep, the mining podcast. In this podcast, we go deep into mining news, hot topics, and live interviews with mining professionals and leading figures in the mining industry. Introducing your host, Rob Tyson, founder and director of Mining International and Mining International Executive, a leading global mining recruitment and headhunting agency.
Hi, mining community. Welcome back to another episode of the Dig Deep, the mining podcast. And today's guest is Beth Borody, who's a seasonal leader in the mining industry and a trailblazer for driving diversity, equity, and inclusion. As the founder and CEO of Femina Collective, Beth champions a community where women in natural resources can find connection, mentorship, and a supportive environment that fosters progress. Her mission is to transform the industry by creating safe spaces where women can collaboratively grow and push for meaningful challenge. We're going to discuss the Femina Collective and what they do and the challenges females face in our industry, which may be not always obvious to all of us. Before I start, just want to give a shout out to our sponsors, Hawcroft, who are leaders in property risk management within the mining industry since 1992. They offer insurance risk surveys, construction risk reviews, and asset critical assessments, and a lot more. They work across 600 sites globally, and they support all areas of mining, including processing, smelting, power, refinery, ports, and rail operations. So if you're looking for any property and insurance risk management services, then please visit their website at www.hawcroft.com, and all those details will be in the show notes. Beth, welcome to the podcast. How you doing?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me on today, Rob. I always love talking about this topic, and I always appreciate any invites to do so. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, no worries. And as we're recording this, you're actually just outside Toronto, and we've got PDAC coming up.
Yes.
And you were telling me how cold it is there.
I know we will really try and warm it up before everyone lands here over the next week or so, but it is a cold one. I was just saying that we were negative 24 degrees Celsius yesterday, and we're in a cold snap. So hopefully that means it can only go up from here, and it will save us all a little bit when we're all downtown.
Certainly, and I hope that does happen. Right. As an active listener, I wonder if you can just tell us a little bit about yourself. Obviously, our audience are from all around the world. So I wonder if you just tell us a little bit about your background, about your career, how you got into the mining industry, and run through your career to sort of present day.
Yeah, absolutely. I always laugh with this question a little bit because my career into mining is a bit unexpected. So I don't actually have a mining background in a traditional sense. I'm not a mining engineer. I'm not a geologist. My background schooling was actually international development and political science. And I grew up in West Africa because my parents were development workers. And so I thought I would follow in their path. And so after I graduated university, I worked for one of Canada's international development organizations, which brought me over to Ghana, West Africa, where I ended up starting my own company with another Canadian that looked at property taxation and business licensing to help local level governments generate their own revenues. And while I was in Ghana, Ghana is obviously a heavy mining country, particularly for gold. I ran up against some of the biggest gold mining companies that were there, and one of them being Canadian, one of them being an American company. And through the company that I was working with, we were doing some community assessments, community activities with them, and looking at how they could improve their relationships. And in 2015, I ended up coming back to Canada. And while I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do next with my career, I had just had my son at the time. And so I was a new mom. I was back in Canada, and someone reached out to me, and he was fairly prominent in the Canadian mining scene. And I had known him because he was a donor to the organization that I had previously worked for. And he reached out to me on LinkedIn, and he said, "Listen, I've been following your career. I think what you're doing is really interesting. Can we have lunch? And have you ever thought about coming into mining full time?" And it was one of those messages that when you get, you just don't say no to. And so I said yes right away. And I met him and we had lunch, and he was telling me about where he thought the industry was going and the greater need for diversity and kind of talent and backgrounds, because it was so kind of traditionally engineer focused, and people were kind of just moving into different roles based on time served as opposed to skill sets and talent. And it was really at the time when all of the talk around ESG, sustainability, everything was moving and getting a lot of traction. And he said, I think we need people like you in the way that you think, the way that you problem solve coming into the industry. And so he spent a good kind of 18 months opening up all the doors he had on Bay Street for me. And he said, I'll open the door, I'll get your foot in, you do the rest, you figure out where you want to land and what you want to do. And so I had so many conversations and totally green to the industry in some regards, speaking with these very senior leaders. And I probably looked like an idiot to some. I probably was confusing to others as to why I was in front of them. But I ended up landing with one of Canada's mid-tier gold companies. And they brought me on as a consultant initially because they had just bought an asset that had a lot of community challenges that they were facing around negotiations, around priorities, those types of things. And so I started as a consultant with them for a few hours a week, and that quickly turned into almost being full-time hours just with them as a consultant. They were going through management changes, and when the CEO who I worked with for the longest period of time landed, he brought me on full-time, and he brought me on in a fairly senior role. He brought me on at a director level, and I remember him sitting me down in his office, and he said, this is either going to make or break your career. This is a huge leap. It's a huge opportunity. And either you're going to rise to the occasion or it's going to burn you out in 6 months and we'll never hear from you again. And luckily it did the first. And it was an industry that I jumped into and absolutely fell in love with. I loved the challenge of mining. I loved how mining kind of touches everything. It's such an ecosystem that can bring so much benefit, but also has a lot of opportunities for improvement. And so I held the role of director for a few years, and then was promoted to vice president of sustainability, which was the first time that company had ever had an executive role for sustainability. And so I was with that role and with that CEO. And during that time, we went through the pandemic. And as everyone knows, the pandemic sent everyone into a 180 of what do we do? How do we operate? How do we keep our sites safe? How do we keep communities safe? And during that time, between him and I, we were able to become the first company in Canada to offer private testing, both for our employees as well as for communities around us. And it really set us on a really interesting trajectory where people were looking to us for advice, looking to us on how we were setting ourselves up for sustainability. And put a lot of spotlight on myself, which was really the first time that happened. And being a young female and not having a mining background, that came with a whole lot of comments, a whole lot of perceptions, a whole lot of different expectations from different people. And I remember I was sitting in my office in one of the times here in Canada when we were between lockdowns where we were sort of allowed outside and sort of not. And I was sitting there. And I remember looking out of my window in my office downtown Toronto and thinking, where are the other women? Where are the other women my age? Where are the other women that may not have gone into mining intentionally, but have landed here, have fallen in love with the industry, who are ambitious, who are talented, all of those things. And I just sent a Zoom link out to a few women that I knew, both from within the company and some without. And 6 of us jumped on our first call. And we had just this very open and honest conversation that wasn't about our titles, wasn't about the companies that we were working for. It was just about how we as women show up in the industry, the challenges we face, what we loved about the industry. And it just was a really open space and open dialogue. And we thought, we need to do this more often. And so I committed to just sending a Zoom link out every quarter. Whoever could join, and we would just truly connect. There was no agenda, no expectation. And so we started doing this every quarter. And by the 4th time we did this, we had 46 women from 16 companies across Canada joining. And it truly was just by word of mouth. It was just people forwarding the invite along. And soon enough, those women started looking at me and saying, what are you doing with this? What are you building? What else can you give us? What else can you provide? And at that time, I said nothing. My role was busy. I was traveling nonstop, as most of us do. I had a family at home. I had my son. My husband and I were actively in fertility treatments for a second child, and so we had our plates were full. There was no question about it. But this need kept coming up, and women kept saying, "We just love what's being formed here. We love connecting with other women. We love connecting with other executives. What are you doing?" And so I went to my CEO and I said, "I think that I've landed on something. Do you want me to build this out for the company and it can be something the company owns, or should I go and build it out myself?" And he said, "Go build it out yourself. We'll support you in any way possible. You've obviously landed something. You need to go and see this through and see what's going to happen." So he gave me full permission to think about what I wanted to create while also holding my job with the company. And sure enough, Femina Collective was born. I thought, what were these women craving? They were craving connection. They were craving opportunities. So how do we get to that next level of leadership? Most of these women were in mid to senior level roles anyways. And we really realized that once women kind of get to those senior management or executive roles, um, you almost you are almost expected to just turn around and help the other women coming up, which is super important, and everyone does a bit naturally, but it left a bit of a void for how women continue to grow their careers, even if they have reached higher levels of management and leadership. And so Femina Collective was born, and we launched as a membership-based organization. We initially, our first year, had a good pocket of women, predominantly just in Toronto. And here we are 4 years later, and we have a community of over 4,000 people globally. We have members in Europe, the US, Canada, and Australia, and we are growing every single day. We've grown our offerings from one membership to 3 different types. And we are also this year, which I'm really excited about, launching our investment arm, which I know we'll chat about in a little bit. But we truly are all about making sure that women are represented in all areas of the industry, that we are welcomed in all areas of the industry, and that we are seen for the talent that we bring forward. And so it just keeps growing. And then in 2023, July 2023, I was both pregnant with my daughter, who is just over a year old now, and Femina was really taking off. And so I stepped away from my role with the company and really focused on building out Femina and giving Femina the attention that it needed.
Yeah, that's a really inspirational story, and something that was just an idea whilst lockdowns were happening, looking out the window and then suddenly sending those few invites out. And now you've turned it into, from what you've just sounded like, it's a great success. It's a huge amount of people, and I suppose you're affecting many people's lives within our industry. I wonder if you can just tell us a little bit about the company, what you do, what your purpose is. I know you've just covered it, but I just wonder if you can just go in a little bit more detail.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so our goal since day one, our mission is always to radically change the experience of women in the mining industry. And we do this by really focusing on each one of our members. There are phenomenal groups out there, women's groups out there, that do a lot of advocacy, do a lot of external work. A lot of the women in mining organizations are really well known for really being the activists and kind of the lobbyists for policy and for inclusivity. And we really believe that that is extremely important, but that landscape's covered. They're doing a great job. And what we were seeing the gap was that women still individually were feeling either imposter syndrome, they were in feeling that there were not safe spaces for them in the work that they were doing. They were kind of climbing the ladder, but feeling like they had to kind of mimic the leaders around them who typically are men. And there are great men in this industry who support women. So we by no means, think that men are the problem, but it was just the industry was not a place that was we couldn't easily move around. And so Femina, when we talk about radically changing that experience for women, we really take kind of the ripple approach, that if we believe that if we can impact one woman and we can grow her confidence, we can connect her with the right people, we can work with recruiters to get her next role, that's going to have a rippling effect for the team she leads, for the communities that she's involved with, for her family, and for herself. And so we really think that as women become bolder, they could become more empowered, more confident, they take more leadership roles, take on more responsibilities. We're just going to see that effect ripple across the industry. And so that has always been our mission from day one, is really focusing on each woman individually. And it's why our membership is a bit different than anything else that's out there. We are really about community building. We're really about providing a spot where women can connect with other women globally. We don't just do lunch and learns. We don't just do events here and there. We're interacting with members every day, all day, from around the world. Members are chatting with each other, sharing challenges, asking for advice, looking for different opportunities. And that's where we're seeing magic happen. I think this past year, especially, we really saw this ramp up when we were able to put women on boards. So we put women on publicly traded boards. We put women in C-suite positions and executive roles with some of the world's biggest mining companies. And we know when we started seeing that happen, we knew that we were getting that reputation and that traction to say, we've got the pool of women, we've got the talent, and we will work with you to make sure that they're being placed in the right spots.
Yeah. What is the role of women, or what role could women play to help with obviously challenging projects that are facing raising capital? Well, they need to secure capital, and I know this is a subject that we've spoken about before recording this podcast. So yeah, just wanted you to just tell us about that.
Oh, absolutely. I think this is one of the most exciting things in the industry right now. And I know that EY just put out their 2024, 2025 top risks in mining. They always put out their top 10 every year. And this year, the number one risk that was identified was access to capital. So it had risen a few ranks. And interestingly enough, a lot of the social side and ESG side had fallen a few ranks. But it really showed what we're all feeling in the industry. It's projects are getting stalled, capital isn't there, economies are hard right now. We know we're going through recessions. We've been going through a recession here in North America for the last couple of years. And so we really feel that women have a really active role to play in a new and unique way for capital to be raised in the industry as retail investors. And this idea really came about a couple years ago. I was supporting one of Canada's juniors, junior project, graphite company out of Quebec. And we were trying to do a raise, and I was working with the CEO to host these luncheons and try and find investors, individual investors who would want to be a part of this. And we were talking to a lot of men. And typically those are the ones, especially here in Canada, that are your retail investors. Anyone who's making a significant investment tends to be older, tends to be white, and tends to be male. And they were all saying the right things to us. They were saying they wanted a female-led project. They wanted something that was really working with communities. They wanted their own legacy to look different than what they had grown up with and what their kind of backgrounds had shown. And so we were doing these luncheons, and we kept feeling like we were getting them to the point where they were going to sign, and then they'd back off, and then they'd sign, and then they'd back off. And we probably had 4 or 5 of these lunches where this group would come together. And at the end of the last one, the one guy who was kind of the leader of the group, so to speak, he eventually looked at the CEO at the time and just said to her, you know, there's really no credible name that we know on your board, and that makes us really nervous. And so we can't invest. We just can't do it. And they left. We were completely deflated. And we looked at each other and we just said, where are the women? Why do women not know that this is an industry that they can also play in, that they can also invest in, and that there's opportunity for? And going through this process, I myself learned a lot about myself as an investor, and that in Canada, I was an accredited investor, which meant that I could have access to private placements. I could have opportunities that others didn't necessarily have if you're just going and buying on the public markets. And so I started thinking about, how do we get more women engaged in this? We know in the mining industry, it's a high income, you're a high earner, especially when you are in those more senior roles. We're the ones that are in this risky, industry all the time. People, when they look at mining who don't know about mining and aren't involved in mining, just see it as too risky of an investment. It's too volatile. You don't want to do it. Where we're the ones that manage those risks every day. We identify those risks. We look at what those risks look like. And I thought, I bet women just don't know. I bet they just don't know that this is the opportunity. I very much, like a lot of women I've talked to since, I got my shares and I got my options through my compensation package and bonus package every year. That was pretty much all I knew up until a few years ago about what investing could look like for me, or what having stocks or shares or options could look like for me. And so we started doing a lot of research, and we started realizing that, yeah, women just did not know that they could play at this space. They did not know what being accredited looked like. They didn't know that mining could be a part of their portfolio if they chose to do so, where they could be making money from the industry. And so we went down a path working with a few lawyers, working with a few executives to build out the Femina investment stream, where we thought if women in Canada in particular, if we could actually look at what capital needs were and pair that with the wealth women are going to hold over the next few years, what is the impact that we could have on the industry? We know everyone has been talking about it for years and years and years. Battery minerals, energy transition, critical minerals, whatever you want to call it. Canada is so rich with all of those resources. We are one of the most resource rich countries in the world. We are one of the most highly regulated, responsible jurisdictions in the world. We have, for better or worse, a sound enough government that there isn't a lot of corruption happening that you find in other parts of the world. And so it should actually be really easy for us, or much easier for us in Canada, to be raising capital and moving our projects forward. And we know that women in Canada by 2030, which is only 5 years from now, will hold 50% of all the wealth in the country. That is the first time this has ever happened. And that is a huge moment for us to show women and to educate women on what mining could be within their portfolios, and just the scope of what is mined, where it's mined, how it's mined, all of those types of things, for them to be able to make really intelligent decisions about how or if they incorporate mining into their own investment portfolios in order to generate their own wealth, and then also support the industry at the same time. So that's what we're really excited about. Over the next couple months, we are launching in March. I think right around when this podcast comes out, we will be making an announcement about this to give women the opportunity to, one, participate in an investment course that we have developed in partnership with financial institutions to teach women about investing, and then specifically about the world of investing around mining, and then also developing a private investment club for women who want to make larger investments, to be able to pool their funds together and have some serious impact on some of the projects that are being developed here.
I suppose how do women tend to make financial decisions? And I suppose it's different if you're in a relationship, but why could mining be a piece of their portfolio?
Mm. We have learned through research that women tend to be a bit more risk aware. I try to avoid risk averse, because it's not that we're averse to risk. It's just that we possibly do a bit more research when it comes to the investments that we are doing. And so we tend to be more risk aware when it comes to investments, as well as we tend to make longer term investments. So when we commit, we commit. And that is really good for mining, because we know, particularly for project stage or smaller mines, who are in the earlier phase of their life of mine, those long-term investments are critical for them. We don't tend to do investments that are just 6 months investments, a year investment, 2-year investments. Women really do tend to do their research, look at the risk, and really commit and do those longer-term investments. And so again, when we were looking at how could mining and women work together in this space, it just naturally was falling into place that this, again, could be an opportunity that women really look at as their longer term investments. And again, we want to be careful. We are not investment advisors. We just want to be able to educate women, to show them that mining has an opportunity for them to look at as a potential long-term investment for their portfolios, while they then decide with their financial planners and advisors what else they want to do. But because women tend to look at money and investments a bit calmer than men, we're not as spontaneous, we're not as fast to make decisions, all of those types of things, it just really lends itself well to finding solid projects that are aligned with that woman's values, her views, where she wants to put her money, and good for the company, because it is that longer term less risky investment from them, from a retail investor that they know will be in it for the long haul.
The DEI is getting obviously major backlash at the moment. Are you worried that this would minimise the importance of obviously the work that Femina Collective are actually currently doing?
Mm. We have been having conversations about this so much over the last year, but really the last 6 months, and really the last month, if we really want to get into it, with the political landscapes that have shifted around the world recently. It's always worrisome when people say that DEI just needs to go away. I mean, we even try to not use DEI for the sake of just trying to use other terminology, because people's ears turn off immediately when they hear DEI. But the fact of the matter is that including women at all areas of the mining industry is not a diversity stat. We're 50% of the population. We are 50% of the talent pool that we know our industry needs desperately over the next 10 years. And again, here in Canada, we're going to own 50% of the wealth in the country. So it's not actually a diversity thing that we're trying to achieve here. It's just actually smart business. And it's smart. It's moving forward in a more progressive way that is inclusive of everyone. Because if we continue to make it that women don't have the same access, we don't have the same availability of opportunities or things like that, we're actually just doing ourselves a disservice in the industry. And so when we look at DEI quotas being taken away, we're looking at the scrutiny of DEI hires. We're looking at, well, one woman couldn't do that job, therefore no woman could do that job. It's just a dangerous area to go into, again, because it doesn't actually make a lot of business sense. We know that when there's like more diverse leadership teams, and that diversity means women, ethnicities, religious backgrounds, whatever it may be, talent backgrounds, all of that matters and makes companies more profitable. We know that when women are looking at health and safety, that sites tend to be safer, that trucks aren't destroyed as quickly, and women drive safer. We know that, again, when women invest, they do it in different ways. And so we need that we need that new way of looking at things, because the industry is in a really tough spot right now. We're in a tough spot for talent. We're in a tough spot for investment. We're in a tough spot for permitting. Everything that's happening in the industry is really hard. And so why wouldn't we actively try and bring something different to try and move those pieces forward?
Yeah, you mentioned a few times, and I imagine our audience may be thinking. You said 50% of the wealth females will have. I just wondered how you get to that stage and what are the reasons, because people may be thinking, and where you potentially got those stats from, etc.
Mm-hmm. So those stats come directly from one of Canada's biggest banks, CIBC. So people can go and look that up for all the reports that they've put out about it. A lot of that comes from inheritance. A lot of that has been growing as well. So it's not like we're going from 0 to 50 in the next 5 years. Women's wealth has been on the rise. That's been because we have been moving into higher earning roles. More women are in the workforce. And then a lot of that is a lot of the millennial generation, which I am included in that, will be getting inheritance from the boomer generation. So the boomers, there's so many boomers, and they're all retiring, or they are passing away, or whatever it may be. And so we're just seeing the passing of wealth go more into women's hands that typically in previous generations would have gone to sons, or would have gone to the man in the family, or things like that. We're seeing those dynamics shift so that women are also accessing that same family or generational wealth as well. And that, coupled with earning more money and being higher earners and being more of the breadwinners in the family, is bringing us up to that stat and getting us to that 50-50 wealth holding of wealth.
Women make up 14% of the mining workforce globally. What can be done to ensure women are obviously properly represented within our industry?
The first thing I always say whenever I'm asked this question is just intentionality. So intentionality of, if you are hiring for a role, make sure that you have women in in your candidacy pool. If you are looking to fill board positions, ensure that you are asking your recruiters to find both male and female candidates. It's really about that intentionality, really thinking that just because you don't see women in your stack of resumes, or you don't see women coming forward, it does not mean that women are not there. It means that we just need to either be approached differently. There needs to be intentionality behind recruiting, and we just need those accommodations. And an example that I always give of this is when I was working with my previous company, we were hiring for a COO. And we were down to, the recruiters had given kind of shortlisted a group of people that they thought were great candidates. And my CEO at the time, to me, he came and he brought all of the resumes to me, and he said, "Can you just take a look at these? Tell me what you think of them. We're going to start interviews." And the very first thing I noticed as I was going through them, there were maybe 5 or 6 resumes at the time. They were all men. And I went to him and I said, "Hey, I noticed there's no women in this pile." And he said, "Oh, like they said that these were the best candidates that they had, so there must not be anyone for this role." And I was like, "No, no, 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 no." And I asked him for 48 hours, and I said, "If you give me 48 hours, I will go and I will personally find candidates who I believe could do this job." And so he said, "Okay, we'll give you 48 hours. We'll hold off on contacting anyone." And so I went to my network and I said, "Here's the role, here's the job description. Who do you know who's looking?" And within 48 hours, we had a handful of women that were all incredibly qualified, and went through the interview process. The company ended up hiring a man, but again, it wasn't. That is okay when the process is fair and has brought forward proper candidates. And it was a real eye opener, because I spoke to our recruiter who helped with that role, and he very openly said, "Yeah, we have our people who we go to. We have the groups that we always go to. And this is an eye opener that we don't have enough women. We haven't intentionally gone out and like figured out how to get more women's CVs and resumes, and understood where women were moving in the industry." And that recruiter I still have a relationship with today. We still work together on roles now, even through Femina and through those sorts of things. And so when you're thinking about increasing that 14%, we should be 50. We should be 50%. There's a lot that goes into that rate, from women or girls in school being interested in mining and the university being geared towards mining. But it is also just about ensuring that women are continuing to get roles that are fascinating and interesting to them. And that just takes intentionality of really making sure that you're recruiting the right people, and that includes women in those roles.
Yes, certainly. And as a recruiter, again, we recruit based on the brief that's given to us by the client, and it's either male or female, and we're not looking for a female. We're not looking for a male. We're looking for someone that has the right skills and experience and attributes for the role. So, but I suppose certain positions there is less women than men in certain positions, but again, I suppose it's just having that access to that pool of candidates, i.e. going through yourselves, where you would have a number of women that potentially could fill those roles. So yeah,
absolutely.
No, totally agree. Last question. Just wondered what the sort of short to medium term outlook is for the Femina Collective, and if there's anything else that you would like to add.
I think our short-term vision right now is launching our Femina investment. So getting our first cohort of women through our investment course, partnering again with those financial institutions, and seeing where that goes, and seeing how many women that we can provide education and knowledge to around investment, and around what how mining can also play into those investment portfolios. That's our main priority right now. We continue to grow and develop. We want to see more of our presence in Europe. We want to see more of our presence anywhere women are in mining, and that is global. That is everywhere. And so we continue to grow our membership base, and continue to see that develop. I think our long-term goal, which is like one of those kind of pipe dreams, but I feel as long as I keep saying it, we're going to make it happen one day, is coupling all of the talent that we have through our membership programs, as well as what we are doing on the investment side. And one day actually doing an owner operator model under Femina, where Femina actually goes into ownership of an operation or a project, and then works its way into both being owner and operator as we continue to develop our own skill set and our own talent. And so that's our long-term goal, is to show how mining can be done differently when women are brought forward, never at the exclusion of men, never at the exclusion of anyone, but just showing what can happen when we actually have that parity of 50-50 from leadership, board, investors, all the way down to employees of the company. So that's our kind of trajectory and our grand vision that we have for Femina.
Yeah, great. Beth, it's been a pleasure speaking with you, and thank you for sharing your story, and amazing story, and how you've built up Femina Collective to what it is today. And I suppose it's still at the start, because it seems there's a lot more ahead in the future. If our audience wants to reach out to you, obviously follow your story, be part of the Femina Collective, how can they go about doing that, and what social media channels are you on?
Yeah, the best way to do that is follow us on LinkedIn. You can follow the Femina Collective on LinkedIn. You can connect with me directly, Beth Borody, on LinkedIn. And then you can reach me at Beth Borody at thefeminacollective.com. And those are always the best ways to get a hold of me.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you again. Hopefully you can probably come on later on in the year or next year and give us an update, and give us an update on the investment arm as well. So that'd be good if you can come on again.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Rob. This was really fun.
Yeah, appreciate your time. Just want to speak to the audience. Thank you for listening. Hope you enjoyed that episode. I mean, anyone that's listening should be sharing this episode. There's probably a lot of males that are listening to this. Please share it with your partners, and share it with all your female colleagues that you know, or within your network. So please get this episode out far and wide, all across the world. Obviously, this podcast is global. Listen to virtually every country around the world. So please share this episode far and wide. And I hope you enjoyed it. And until next time, happy mining.
Thank you for listening. Remember to reach out to Rob via the show notes, and be sure to subscribe and leave a review. Until next time, happy mining, helping each other to improve the mining industry.